save a life is to save the world. And that to me is something that I've carried through since my very first medic school when I was 17 years old. To save a life is to save the world. And my whole time in Ukraine, it's been focused on my patients and my patients alone. They're my waking thought from the time I wake up to the time that I go to bed. Yesterday, while I didn't have my phone, being Shabbat, and when I went back to the rabbi's house, I had already had missed calls from medics needing help that had wounds that didn't know how to deal with them. And even whenever I left the service yesterday, I was still treating wounds over the phone and being there for my medics. You have to understand that there was no combat medic program for the country at all. And their healthcare system that had been propped up and left over from Soviet times just was not adequate for it. But what people don't realize, and I'm going to share with you, is that, Russia put a bounty on the head of a whole lot of medical personnel, and they hit our field hospitals in the first couple weeks of the war, and we were completely decimated. So when I went to the country, I walked across the border March 1st when the war first began last year. I was en route already, and then the evening of going into the first is when I crossed the border. That next day, I was already working.
Can you make a pause here?
Yeah,
Because I want to start. No, you stay here. You stay here. Don't go anywhere. I just want to start showing some photos, and we will begin with your life kind of before Ukraine.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. You just share a screen so everyone can see it.
And to be clear, out of the 30-something photos and videos that I sent the rabbi here, I think we agreed upon 7 that would be appropriate for everybody to see. So.
There were a lot of photos that I didn't want to stress you out, especially after breakfast. So. Yeah. So we have some photos of you here.
Yeah. So this is me as a baby medic and AIT in the American Army, learning my craft, and nothing too special, but 18-year-old me.
So where are you at this point? Where geographically are you located?
At this time, I was going through medic school in Fort Sam Houston, Texas, which is the home of all military medicine for the United States Armed Forces, be it Navy, Air Force, Army, does not matter. All medical personnel goes to Fort Sam Houston and works at Burke Army Medical Center. Now, each branch of the American military has different specialties and occupations for their medics. So you can be a medic in the Air Force or in the Navy and be night and day different than the medic school that I had to attend and went through. So we specialize in casualty combat care, tactical casualty combat care, care under fire, and how to treat severe trauma patients while in the midst of combat, get them stable, and get them transported to a casualty collection point or stabilization point for them to then be able to be transferred and moved to higher medical care. We are the first line in any medical treatment for the military in general. And as a combat medic, I would be assigned to an infantry unit. I was particularly assigned to scouts, people that would go out, probe the line, and come back. And that's where I started out as just a boy that knew nothing.
Okay, so there are 2 more photos here.
She likes this photo, but this actually just in training. It was nothing high speed.
This one is my favorite. He was so badass on this photo. It's like I was like, this is the best picture.
Those that were here yesterday, I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit, but I'd served in the American Army, and then I made Aliyah, and then I served in Zachau and served in the Israeli Army, and had it was a great honor and a great privilege to be able to do that. So, fight for our Jewish nation, and this is me a little bit older in my second service, going through basic training with a bunch of 18-year-old kids. And then this is me in Ukraine teaching and going through a tactical class, because not only do I have to teach everything from medical students to civilians on how to treat trauma patients, we do it in a muscle memory way. And that you can only train the way you fight. And in combat, you wear a lot of weight, you wear a lot of gear, several kilos. My med bag alone is 25 kilos that I carry. Not to mention, with our body armor and with everything else, you can be, kilos and pounds. You can easily carry 100 pounds worth of gear like it's nothing. And have to be able to move your patient, and which in itself is a degree of difficulty that most people don't think about. And the way that the war is being fought right now in the trenches, as we're going to see here in a little bit, you have to carry those patients sometimes for kilometers. You're wounded, and we got a severe trauma patient, maybe like a patient with amputee, gunshot wounds, things like this. And then we have to move those patients under fire, under drone fire, under artillery fire. And then even when we're evacuating them in the vehicles, we're still under artillery fire for up to 15 kilometers out of the front. And they still hit and target our hospitals. That's an absolute thing. So there was parts of the country that I'd been to where I went to the local hospital to try doing what I could, and it was just empty because the nurses and the doctors had already been killed.
Okay. For everyone who is online, so we can see.
And don't be shy about asking questions, or if someone asked something yesterday, but just remember that I have to work really hard on having a filter. So don't ask something you don't want the answer to.
So there are a couple of photos of Ukraine, and like this is a photo of from July 5th. So this is like contemporary situation. Do you want to say like a little bit of where the front line is? Some
So this occupied area right here is actually a fraction. Throughout the war, even at the beginning of the war, when I first got there, the Russian positions had already like moved down and were surrounding around Kyiv. So I was there for the first defense of Kyiv, and some of my first patients. That's where I treated them. But this over here, Bakhmut, this place. The casualty reports on this has been suppressed for strategic reasons, and it's compromised information, and I can't go into a lot of it, but it's astonishing the amount of killed in action. And in Saladar, which they were trying to take Bakhmut and coming around, and in Saladar in 7 days we had 11,000 casualties. It was dubbed one of the bloodiest battles at the time in a 7 day period since Stalingrad in World War II, from the amount of sheer in a 7 day period of casualties. And in and around Bakhmut and these regions that we fought all winter long there, they send waves and waves and waves of men at us. Almost think World War I style tactics. Yeah, that we dig trenches. We hold 3 trench lines, 1 to 2 kilometers apart from each other. The Russian holds trench lines. We have no man's land in the middle. We're underneath constant artillery, constant drone, constant airstrikes. They don't let up. And for you to take the Russian position, you have to cross a large open area almost consistently to get to the Russian position, and then we trade trenches back and forth. And a lot of times, they dubbed it the Battle of the Zombies, because the Russians were hopping their men up on amphetamines, and they were having to sometimes be wounded 6 and 7 times before they actually fell. It was a whole thing. But this is a representation that just because this is where the line is, we deal with casualties all over the country. I have different apartments because I'm constantly changing locations, and my schools and my students are spread all over the country, so I hardly stay in one spot. I'm constantly moving, but you're always underneath rocket attack. There wasn't not one night that I was in country. I've spent over 300 days there where we're not underneath at least a rocket attack, suicide drones. And when they talk about the drones, suicide drones, a lot of people think these little Walmart drones that are about this big. Well, the Iranian drones, if they have a 30-40 foot wingspan, I'm probably short. These things are massive, look like aircraft. If anybody's familiar with the P-38s from World War II, it looks very similar to that. And even when you shoot them out of the sky, they're designed to explode down and out. So I had whole areas. I worked at a place where we were digging for orphans, their buildings that had been completely bombed, destroyed. There's no civilian, there's no safe place, there's no place that's not being touched. Every person there is part of the war effort because their lives depends on it. Everybody's lives depends on it. Their mother, their children, and everybody. And so many people are staying in place, and are staying there to fight, not fleeing, not running, have next to nothing, giving every single thing that they have. Seen in restaurants where the waitresses make Molotov cocktails, and in the churches where the orphans and the children are helping make ghillie suits, and everybody that has a mechanic binds together, and we help fix vehicles. And this war is being fought from the ground up, not the top down. And here in a few minutes, when I start talking about supplies and like different issues that we've ran into since we've been there, this war is being fought by the people, and 100%. And Russia's never going to take Ukraine and occupy it without having to kill every single Ukrainian, because they're never going to stand for it. I met in each one of my classes, and I've had approximately 1,400 students since I've been there. And then I train trainers, and that's what I do now. So I focus on training trainers to replicate the knowledge, and then I take those trainers to the front. We do evacuations together, set up a casualty collection point. We'll treat wounded together. I'll get them set up. We'll do about 4 days on the line, and then I rotate back and continue to do something else. But always trying to replicate the knowledge because we have a gap. Oh, sorry. And people, I'll talk forever. She keeps me in line. So we talk about like like training. So this is one of our training grounds. Now you see these guys, their uniforms. This is all mismatched. This is all stuff that the people volunteered or sometimes people made. At the beginning of the war, the babushkas, the grandmas, were sewing the plate carriers, and the men were cutting steel or compressing car doors or using anything that we could to make body armor because we don't have it. And a lot of these guys, some of these people in this photo are already dead. Usually get sent to the front. You come through a course like mine, and you have 2-3 days maximum, and then you get sent. And then if I don't do my job, then you just don't get training and you get sent either way. We're constantly filling the line. So and I say I was talking about being gas pipes on the villages up there. The natural gas pipes are ran on the sides of the road, on the surface of the ground. And we were underneath artillery, and like as you could hear that artillery shell coming in, I was asking him about these gas pipes because in my mind I thought if they got hit, it would get blown up. But that was just outside Bakhmut where that video was taken, and there was more videos to go with that one, but
Trying to be PG. So.
and I want to point out that the van that I was in front of there, that was a homemade ambulance. And we just made do with what we could. You take any vehicle that you can, any vehicle that runs. Sometimes we're doing evacuations and Toyota pickup trucks. I had a Mercedes. Well, we'll see the van here in a minute.
Can I interrupt you? So this is what I do. Like my specialization is vehicles and buying vehicles for Ukraine and fixing the vehicles. So this is my department of helping. And my team actually did this like self-made evacuation ambulances, and we will see some videos of how they function. It's very interesting. Okay, you continue. I will show next picture.
Vehicles do not last on the front lines.
Don't last.
You were talking about you training trainers, etc. Are you doing that in English, Ukrainian?
Yeah. So now I work a lot with medical students and doctors because as the doctors were killed, we had to promote medical students fast. And, a lot of them spoke English or speak English, but I cannot teach in a foreign language, right? So I have to be able to teach proficiently the way that I do. And at the beginning of the war, I was assigned interpreters, and my whole team of Ukrainians that I'd put together spoke English, and we just made it work. But when I go to the front and like when I'm in the trenches, I have a guy I call my parrot. You'll see a picture of him in a minute. Everybody has a war name. He's Parrot because he repeats everything I say. And we were under fire on the front, moving from position to position, and he has to interpret everything that I'm saying to whomever I'm saying and to keep things in line or in order. If something would happen to my interpreter, I'm dead. So talking about which, this is, we're using, in this photo here, we're using tourniquets. That's one of the main things that I teach is tourniquets. Proper application of tourniquets, where to use them, how to do proper tourniquet conversions, the difference between primary, secondary shrapnel. These things are very critical. But an effective tourniquet is the best tool that we have to save lives in Ukraine right now. And we just have a shortage of them. We can't get enough. We're making them in Dnipro. I'll still
Good.
go back.
Go back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Hold on a second. So and these are some of my students. So as you see, they show up. But I meet every single one of them. I shake their hand. I look them in the eye. I give them my phone number. Every student that I've ever had. To me, they're my family. They're my patients. And until this conflict's over, I'm going to be there for them and support them that I can. And this gentleman here, Mark, he flew from halfway around the world just to deliver me medical supplies and to buy tourniquets. He did his whole thing that he travels around the United States and gets people because one tourniquet can save a life and we have to purchase them. So that's what he does. And he was a great friend.
Can you repeat the question, please, because people on Zoom will not hear it.
Okay. Yeah. So the question being tourniquets stop bleeding, but are we able to get fluid resuscitation properly, IV fluids and things like this? The answer is yes and no. Every situation is completely dependent and different. I have to hoard and store medical supplies, buy medical supplies, beg, borrow, bribe, do whatever I have to do. And then, I've been on the front sometimes where we don't have nothing. And other times where we're able to do proper fluid resuscitation and we're able to do things. But every brigade and every unit is independently responsible for their own medical teams and their own collection points and their own evacuations. So when it comes to like actual having fluid resuscitation and things like this, it's I train it, I teach it. We go through hundreds of catheters, constantly sticking each other because they got to have so many live sticks. But I give them a 5-minute tutorial and then we're poking each other with needles. And with fluid resuscitation, the main thing that we have access to at this point is lactated ringers. So plasma is next to impossible to get. Whole blood is out of the question. There's a whole issue with the legality of using whole blood in Ukraine at this particular moment. So saline and lactated ringers is the best options that we have.
Russian defectors, is it significant? Is it growing? And do you treat Russians?
Do I treat Russians, and is there any type of Russian defectors? The question. Well, I'm a medical professional. There ain't a person on the face of this planet that I'm not going to treat and meet, and that's it. That's period. I don't care if they're Russian, if they're not Russian. I'm not there to kill people. I'm not there to hurt anybody. Simply because their government says this or their government says that. People are people. And I'm never going to forget the humanity of our work and our job as combat medics. Now, that being said, yes, my medics have treated plenty of Russian prisoners, Russian captives, Russian wounded. This is not an issue. See, because every Russian that we have, that we capture or that comes over, we're able to trade back for Ukrainians. So if I have a Russian that I don't medically treat, I'm also killing a Ukrainian because that Russian life is worth trading for a Ukrainian life. And that's something that, we absolutely must do. But I've never seen anyone denied medical aid. I've never seen anyone denied help from anybody. As far as like actual Russian defectors go, I'm not really sure. I dealt with a few Wagner prisoners that were terrified, pulled out of prisoners next to no training, given a rifle, told they survived 3 months. They get to go home, and they run to our lines, throw down their guns, and are just like, "Help us, please." So we had one in particular that he was a student from Africa and went to Russia and had less than a gram of marijuana and got sentenced to several years hard prison, and then ended up getting recruited and getting sent to the front lines in Ukraine. So, I mean, this poor kid went through a whole lot for a joint.
Next picture.
He's saying that there was no injection, and I asked about some medicine. He said there was no injection, and he was walked by himself at the position all the time. Thanks. You mean the contact with him? Yeah. Changes?
So this was a very condensed version of this video. Now, I was asking him what his position was, and if you were paying attention to my parrot, he's telling me that this man walked out of the position. So this man walked for 4 kilometers to get medical treatment, and I was the first medic that he had came across and found. Now he had a gunshot wound to the face and to the jaw, and it went through his cheek, and he had also been shot through his knee twice. And he still walked and carried himself out. And I'm telling you, the mentality of these brave Ukrainian men, he would have went back to the line that night if he could have. And when we were talking to him, all he was concerned about was his brothers in the line, his brothers in the trench, and getting back to being able to do his position and his responsibility. Now, in itself, the fact that he had to walk out. Now, when this video was taken, we were still within artillery range. We were still dodging artillery, and it happened to be through the day. Most of the time we do evacuations at night with no lights on our vehicles to cut back on the artillery, and maybe the driver uses a monocle for night vision if we're lucky, or we hope that the moon's really bright that night because we don't have a lot of gear. But the van that we were in, it's a completely homemade van that's not made for as an ambulance. You hit a bump, and I was operating while working on my knees that the whole entire time. And sometimes when we pick up the casualties, we have more casualties than we'll hold. So, imagine trying to fit 4 people into the back of this van while working on your knees and dealing with putting a tourniquet on this guy, and this person's bleeding out. And I don't know if you know this or not, but patients like to argue with you. Everybody's a doctor when they're wounded. That's a fact. I've seen people loosening tourniquets or taking tourniquets off. And, like I tell my students, your patients will talk to you all the way until they die.
So there will be one more video, and then I will ask you about the show.
Okay.
Видит только одного человека, не может сказать.
Here the exposure.
You can see the artillery, the smoke in the background from the artillery rounds falling.
Що таке?
Ні,
He's not wounded.
переметив.
Shofar. We'll talk about it in a minute.
Треба його переложити на ці ноги.
Де рана?
Ні, ви там кровний де там перевірили його там. Що там? Хорошо. Він казав, що
Every one of those people wearing the green tape on their arm were wounded. Every one of them. A matter of fact, they had been taken off the trench, and the light wounded, were ordered to carry the heavy wounded. And then we met them in the middle of that field being no man's land. So when you're in the back, like looking in the distance, and you see the smoke going off in that far tree line, that's the Russian position. So we were technically within rifle range the whole time that we were standing there. And later on in the video, and for different reasons, we didn't add it. But at that particular moment, they shot phosphorus over us. So while we were standing there and doing that, there was phosphorus falling over the top of our head. Now, every one of those men that were standing around that patient, none of them were medics. All of them, some of them were from the village. They were welders, baristas, lawyers, whatever. You name it, that's what they were. Everything but soldiers. They are now anyway, soldiers now. But every one of them had shrapnel wounds. Some of them had gunshot wounds. But if you're wounded in the morning, we can't evacuate you until evening because of the artillery fire and because of where it's at. But this guy was critical enough that they sent him out in waves. Now, this was on the line in between Bakhmut and Soledar. Now, that first guy that I spoke to, and he said, I'm not wounded. He's just cold. He was wounded. He had frostbite. He ended up, losing toes. So, that being said, we weren't even able to fit everybody into the machine to do an evacuation. So we ended up evacuating two separate groups under fire for that particular thing. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on was that picture of the shofar that was next. So as you see, this bag here is my combat tefillin from Zachal. So my you have this waterproof, watertight part that's part of your uniform that fits on your body armor to carry your tefillin and carry your shofar. And I carried it with me everywhere that I went. And the shofar I found great use for. I used it more than once in combat because we didn't have radios, right? So it's amazing what. Yeah. So you blow a shofar properly, it carries distance. I promise you. The first time that I blew the shofar in battle was outside of Mykolaiv, and it stopped combat for every bit of 3 minutes while the Russians, everybody was trying to figure out what the hell the sound was, like where it was coming from. Literally, just a full firefight just stopped for about 3 minutes. But in this particular case, we're underneath that bridge, and they were flying drones. So at the beginning of the video, they're talking about these drones coming over and they're watching us. And these Russians will follow you with these drones, but you just never know when the artillery is going to hit, when they're going to do it. So we had to hide the vehicle in the woods or hide the vehicle the best that you can and then wait, but there's no radios. So we didn't have ways to communicate with each other. So you're taking a group of wounded out and you tell these group of men, okay, I'm going to come back to this exact position in 35 minutes. And then you show back up. Maybe there's someone there. Maybe they're not there. Maybe they're dead. Maybe they're not dead. You don't know, but you risk your life to find out. And I found myself underneath that bridge in that creek, and I'd blow the shofar and the driver would hear it, and that's when he would know to bring the ambulance around, so they would cut back on being able to be underneath direct artillery fire.
I'm showing that.
What is that, a shofar as well, like?
Oh, the question is if other people had shofar. No, I was the only crazy person that I met at that particular moment. Oh, yeah. So this is what our fighting positions look like. You get in that and you sit there. And you charge and you don't fall back. Sometimes the trench lines are deeper, but I mean, essentially that hole right there is your home, it's your life. And a lot of our medics, they have to treat their wounded in those holes and then move them. Well, I mean, I don't know that particular one. I didn't dig it, but there's no set thing in place for it, right? So there's no systemized training to say we're gonna do this a particular way. They give you a shovel and they tell you your life depends on it. So some people dig really deep, some people don't. And some people start digging once they get there and see the artillery. This was out of a very, 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 very hard stabilization point. Probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my whole life in that stabilization point. But this particular photo itself, we chose it because it didn't have the blood and the gore, but it still captivated the point behind it. This is a knee pad to protect your knees. And that 7.62 by 51 AK-74 round went straight through his knee. And it had almost completely amputated his leg because the sheer velocity of the round going through would remove the kneecap. And it was literally just the skin on the side of the legs and some of the tendons that was holding it in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So this is my parrot. I owe my life. This man was one of the bravest Ukrainians I've ever met. Hands down, my best student, my best friend. We're the exact same age. You wouldn't think it. He was smart. He lived a life as a bartender and enjoyed himself. And, I've spent my life traveling the world, breaking my body down. But you see this bag? He's carrying my medical supplies. And that's minimum. On a severe trauma patient, I can only maybe treat four patients out of that bag. With proper means, with fluid resuscitation, things like this. And if you have to carry fluid, like what we were talking about, that weighs. It's weight. And in over there in Ukraine, lactated ringers don't come in plastic bags; they come in glass bottles. So you carry glass bottles of all these items to be able to do so. But parrots, I talk to him every day, worry about him every day. He runs all my operations while I'm here. So Ukrainians training Ukrainians, that's effective. Someone like me coming in and having to have someone interpret every few minutes, this is not an effective. We waste our time, and hours matter in our training classes. So my life depends on these men, and they've never let me down. Yes, sir. Well, my official title is a doctor of combat, doc, or officially 68 whiskey healthcare specialist. As the identifier, doc is a nomenclature that you earn after you've treated a patient under fire, and in itself, it's rare. As far as other 68 whiskeys in Ukraine doing what I do, I've only met maybe 2 or 3. Now, the whole country is full of everybody in the medical profession buying U.S. Army manuals and books and trying to read protocols and try to teach from protocols, but teaching from experience is a completely different animal. I have years and years of training under my belt. Now, when it came to typically, I have 3 days to make a basic junior medic that's proficient in hemorrhage control, tourniquet conversions, primary, secondary shrapnel, occlusive dressings, needle chest decompression, maintaining airway, and how to properly evacuate. And I do that in 3 days. 10, 12-hour days, high repetition. But I've never worked with people that are smarter and work harder and learn as fast as they do. Their lives depend on it, and we know it. And when you're in a situation where your friends died yesterday and you're going to the same place tomorrow, they pay attention to every single word. You don't repeat yourself a whole lot. So they're very motivated with it. Now, Parrot, we've been 7 months together, day in and day out. You know, he sleeps on the floor next to me, like all this time together. So in itself, he's still in training, but I don't know how many thousands of hours that I have, you know, invested into him, but there's a reason that he's training my trainers now. I've turned it effectively. I've been able to turn it over to him. So all of our instructors throughout the country, and I know this ain't an individual effort because as I work on teams with other medical professionals and schools and stuff like this, that, you know, 12 to 14,000 trained, something like this, consistently with like our pyramid, the way that we've built it and done it since the beginning of the war. And that number's growing every week, every day. All my medics are still running courses and they don't take days off, because you take a day off, people die, and you can't take a day off. That's why the first 100 days of the war, we just didn't stop. Day in and day out. It never ended. I would train students at the beginning of the war and in and around Mykolaiv. Between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. I would sleep, and I would have my interpreter start class at 6 a.m. And then I would show up to class, and then we would teach until 4 p.m. And then we would eat, and then we would get prepped, and then I would take those students and we would start doing evacuations, because the line was right up to next to the city. And any given night, you know, we could have 30 to 50 evacuations, them as a team, with only 1 day of medical training and getting them set up in these hospitals. And then the next day, get a new group and do it again. I did that consecutively for 2 weeks.
I want to just add, because you mentioned, you don't go, you stay. You just mentioned that 100 days, we just reached 500 days mark. 500 days of work.
And I'm over 300 in of the 5.
Okay, let's look at the next.
Yeah, so we're talking about medical supplies. Yeah, so everybody is always asking me about all this foreign aid that's getting sent to Ukraine. Well, nobody sent it to me. I promise you that. We don't have centralized medicine in the sense of they disperse supplies that way. Everything is grassroots in Ukraine, built from the ground up. So you have to know someone that knows someone, or you have to buy your own supplies. And this was at the beginning of the war. I was east of Bakhmut before the Russians had got to Bakhmut. And I want to point out, that says 1960. I was even using bandages from the 40s. I was using Polish bandages from 1938. And we made do. It was not an exaggeration. And in this picture here, you can see the boxes of this handful of medical supplies. I went to this battalion to support them. It's 4,500 men. They had 10 medics, 1 village doctor, and 3 cardboard boxes. That was our supplies for enough people to populate a small town. Now, as the wars progressed, that was at the very beginning of the war, whenever, you know, everybody was just throwing what we could towards the front. That's not necessarily the case right now. You know, we have all these great organizations and the hospitaliers and places like this that are doing everything that they can, but that still don't change the fact that a lot of my men are getting sent to the front right now without the direct supplies that they need. And these combat medic or trauma companies from Europe that are trying to get rich are coming into Europe. So I still a lot of now in politics and dealing with conferences in Kyiv, where the first thing out of their mouth is saying that all of our men have everything that they need. And you could have heard everyone in the room laugh and / get angry, because everyone there had friends or people on the line, and you know that like it's needed. But people come through my course, they leave with an individual first aid kit, tourniquet. And at one given time, for me to be able to teach, I got to have training supplies. So if I teach 20 people, I'm using 20 training tourniquets and I have to buy 20 hemostatics, and we got to have thermal blankets, and we use nasopharyngeal airways. You can't train medical repetition without having medical supplies in itself. So when I first got there at the beginning of the war, we didn't have anything. And I didn't know how I was going to help or what I was going to do, but I wasn't going to take these brave men and give them nothing. And I completely, drained my life savings, sold off everything that I could. I even sold like the TV and stuff out of my house to sit there and do this. And then racked up more debt than I'd ever care to admit in personal loans just to pay for it, because can't fundraise. I can't be an administrator. I can't write course curriculum, teach medics, do evacuations, run a stabilization point. I'm only one person. You can only do so much. But when lives depend on you and you're seeing them die in such a rapid fashion, it's amazing what you can be motivated to do and to get done consistently. Sir.
To that point, though, cover
Mhm. Well, a lot of the Soviet, sorry, yeah. With all the billions of dollars in aid, where's the concentration of medical supplies? Well, equipment's expensive. So all these countries, giving out dollar figures, it's an equipment, right? So if a piece of equipment costs $30 million for a single piece of equipment, someone says, well, what did they do with that $30 million? Well, it was a piece of equipment. And I don't know if you know this or not in a war, but every time that a soldier dies, we lose an IFAC, we lose body armor, we lose a uniform, we lose a weapon, we lose munitions for every single soldier that dies. So even if we arm thousands of soldiers or give them IFACs, first aid kits, things like this, and then they go to the trench and they just don't come back out of the trench, or they've been on the line for weeks and months on end, those supplies in themselves are completely gone. As far as volunteers, that's where the majority of all of our medical supplies come from. Volunteers, donations, people driving them across the border into Ukraine, and being able to do what you can. And even that isn't cut and dry, because you gotta pay this border guard just right, and you got to do this and you got to do that. But we use a lot, and I worked with some organizations that would give me expired medications that the Ukrainian government legally can't administer or can't legally give out. But I've never seen saline expire. So things like this, we make do with what we can, how we can. So when I say that my apartment literally looks like a medical storage house, it does.
Let's pause for a second because I want to show a little bit more photos, okay? Because there are photos of the medical supplies.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
And we have like about maybe 15 minutes, sort of. So, let me like skip the medical supplies and then I'll come back.
Yeah, so this suitcase, this is how this stuff's brought to me. People bring me this stuff, but this is Israeli bandages. It's critical. We need them, gotta have them, gotta have hemostatics, gotta have tourniquets. There's just no way around it. And when you're teaching this stuff, and everyone on the battlefield, so in an actual organized military, every single soldier has a certain degree of medical training that they can respond to. They know how to do tourniquets, they know how to pack a wound, they know how to wrap a wound, these kind of basic things. And then someone like me that specializes in trauma stabilizes them, does detailed primary, secondary assessments, airway interventions, advanced procedures, things like this. And I train a variety from everything from basic first aid to people with more advanced skills, doctors, medical students on crikes, chest tubes, and things like this.
Okay, I'll go back to some photos. We will not see like all of them for the sake of time, but we will see.
Yeah, so this is at the beginning of the war. This is what a tank looks like. So for everybody that thinks that tanks are, this great piece of equipment, they're no different than soda cans when they get hit with artillery. Tank and armored equipment's a guaranteed death sentence. You don't survive if they're hit. This, if you notice, they're two armored, we'll call APCs. They rammed each other. That was a Ukrainian APC rammed a Russian APC and took it out. And when they did it, they killed themselves and they killed the Russians. So everybody in itself as it is. Now I want you to think about that. Those men knew what they were doing when they did it. That our position was being attacked by that APC, and we had a 30 millimeter cannon, and we wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for those sacrifices. They sacrificed themselves so that on our line we would be okay. And I've seen things like that every day, every single day that I was there. The sheer self-sacrifice for the people around you and the people next to you, and in the fight to continue. And I'd have people come through my class that had never even held a weapon before that were going to the front. And I would, and I'd ask them if their families were safe. And I had one tell me that his wife and his 4 kids had been killed in a rocket attack 2 days prior. The man was completely by himself. And if you understood how many of my students are exactly in that particular situation, that their families have been decimated by this. And like I can't put enough on the loss of life. And to save a life is to save the world. And when I was in the Israeli army, we made a vow, never again, never again. And I seeing the mass graves. I've been there when this stuff's happening, and it's happening again in our time, our generation, right now, as we're talking about. As Jews, to be at the forefront of this with the most persecuted, race, and arguably one of the most existence of the world, we have to be a shining light in this particular scenario and situation, and to preserve as much life as possible, and to be on the forefront to make sure that this atrocity ends.
Okay, you can ask a question.
I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Political question. Have you had any contact with Israeli combat medics on the ground?
So officially, Israel's stance is that they do not interfere. They do not interfere. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the repeating of the question. Have I ran into any Israeli combat medics since I've been there? I've ran into a lot of Israelis. Trained with Israelis, worked with Israelis. Nobody's there underneath the guise of the Israeli government. We're there as Jews. We're there as volunteers. We're there as people that have a love and a heart for other people and to do the right thing.
Do they get any of the supplies from Israel to help?
Well, it ain't coming from the country of Israel, but it's coming from Israelis and Jews. And yes, I promise you, we have there's Magen Am and Magen David ambulances. I've seen them on the front, and supplies and med bags being donated, and whole entire synagogues that have stuff that they do what they can, how they can. And there are whole entire Jewish units in the Ukrainian army. That is a fact.
Okay, let's go to the next. There will be a couple of pictures with like
This-
instructions. We'll go
yeah.
like fast.
Just like this just shows you this is the normal civilian. This is a grocery store. This I was talking about seeing an artillery shell take down a building. That wasn't a rocket, that was an artillery shell, and that was one artillery shell that collapsed that. And as you see, there were people in this building, and we dug for them the best that we could.
You see on the side of the picture, it actually says welcome. This
See, I'm learning something. I don't speak Ukrainian. I didn't know.
Yeah.
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 This is the villages. So this was over the winter. This is what the villages look like all across Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine. I mean, where they look like that. Those were people's homes. There ain't no insurance. There ain't nothing to fall back on. The government ain't coming in and giving you money to help you with your house. I'm sorry if you're in your 80s or 90s and your house gets hit like this, you take what you can and you're homeless now, or you do what you can. And Ukrainians bind together all the empty apartments in Kyiv, in Odessa, and Kharkiv, Dnipro, Lviv. Everybody just hands them. People coming in from these villages and them saying, here's the keys to my apartment, take it. Everybody just being there for each other. I don't know how many apartments and buildings and stuff that I stayed in that where the people had left and went to Poland or had migrated and just left the key and said, if you need it, use it. We're here for you.
That's exactly what we did. We left our keys in Kiev and we said whoever needs an apartment can use it, and there are people living in our apartment. Right now, as we speak.
So
there are a few pictures of this.
this was our trip to the front. This was our van that we were operating out of, and go to the next one. It was a little bit, as you see, and then this was a different one. Yes, that's a bullet hole through our rear view mirror. These are some of my medics. Man, this man right here, I'm so proud of him. This is us at the very towards the beginning of the war, and now he's in charge and has whole entire ambulance crews underneath him, and he's in charge of about 20 people right now. But when I met him, he didn't even know what a bandage was or how to open it. And I gave him a 10-hour course before he treated his first wounded. 10 hours, and he was treating it. And we were on the line when this photo was taken. And then, of course, as we give medical supplies and as people donate and we get things, we take photos with those individuals with those medical supplies to show people how they're helping and why they're helping them.
Okay, are you ready for another video? Okay. There is no sound to this.
Well, we took the sound out.
You just have to trust
You
it,
don't-
but this is like the easiest level of videos to watch. Like this is,
And if you notice, there's just a wood shelf on the side of that ambulance right there, and I'm on my knees. And we actually, we're the roads are so bad because they've been under nonstop artillery. So sometimes you can't drive down them, sometimes you can drive down them. But we actually had dodged an artillery shell, and I came up off the ground and it hit my head like so hard, like on the ceiling. Because as you see, like I'm on my knees, I can't move, and the stretchers sliding back and forth. So my parents like having to take his foot and prop the stretcher in place so that I could expose these wounds and work on it. And he's wearing 6 layers of clothes. And this man had been shot twice. This man had been shot twice through the kidneys, and it had lodged in his lower abdominal region. But it was 4 hours before I got to him. That's how long that man had been wounded and had survived. And thank God that one of our students was there and was able to administer transamic acid and really help with internal bleeding. And that was one of the, I think one of the reasons that we were able to get him, but he lived. He's okay. He's with his family now. Everything's all right.
So when you evacuate these soldiers, where are they taken to?
So when we evacuate the soldiers, where we take them to? Well, every single time it's completely different. So a casualty collection point is where you gather a large group of wounded in one particular area and you can do triage there. A stabilization point has, more advanced procedures, things along these lines that we're able to, do, intubate and ultrasounds, things like this in a stabilization point, and then evacuate it to a hospital and different hospitals throughout Ukraine.
Are they offered hospital?
Every one of them that can. There's not a medical professional in Ukraine that's not doing the best that we can as much as we can. We're just dramatically outnumbered. And the hardest part is getting the wounded, because without zero line medics, without the man in the trench that we easily could die in the trench, we can't even get them to the hospitals. But as far as like advanced medical procedures, surgeries, stuff like this, doing everything that we can. And Europe's really aiding in the help of our advanced cases a lot. So that's really nice. Severe patients, like if foreigners like myself, if I'm wounded there, I'm probably going to be in Poland or Germany in a matter of hours. They get foreigners out as fast as possible because we have whole entire legions of foreigners there, international legion. So
Where is the area your team and you work in? Is it many areas? For instance, have you been in the Odessa area? And are there other groups such as yours doing similar work in different area regions?
What is my location that I do the work and other groups that I work with? There are other groups. Matter of fact, it's just people just bound together. There's nothing official, right? So like I'm not an official organization. I'm not nothing. I'm just a man trying to do the best that I can while I'm there. And there's all kinds of people doing exactly that with the experience that they have to the best of their ability all over the country, doing what we can. Everybody's maximum effort. Now, as far as location goes, I am all over the country all the time. Because for safety reasons, I change my location every 3 days. I'll tell people that I'm going here and then end up going there. Like I'm very cautious about this stuff because people like me, we don't survive very long there. I'm an oddity. Out of the 3,000 plus trainers that were there at the beginning of the war, over 2,200 of them were killed before July. So that was July of last year, not this year. So Russia has this thing about military trainers, and that's what I fall into the category of, is a military trainer. Even though I'm a medical professional, I don't teach people to use combat arms. I teach medicine, but I still fall underneath the guise of that. So there's active bounties on our heads. Sir.
There-
Are there infiltrated Russian agents looking for us in Ukraine? Well, this war just didn't happen overnight. And especially, it was more prevalent at the beginning of the war. There were whole entire rogue groups of Russians that would dress up in Ukrainian uniforms. And you never knew when you came to a roadblock or where you're at or what you were doing. As the wars progressed, that immediate threat has, it's been reduced with the neutralization of a lot of these groups. However, I'd be a fool to say that the risk is still not there and still not prevalent. Sleeper cells has been a tactic that's been used as old as time.
I want to say something about rogue groups. I just wanted to say that the rogue groups in the beginning of the war, they were very much present in Kiev. So Victor's father, my dad-in-law, but I call him father too. So he calls us and he's like, I went outside to walk with a dog, and like there was a rogue group like in our where our building is. So he just went there in Kiev. He went outside and there are like dead bodies of these rogues killed by, Ukrainian army, like in front of the house, like in the center of Kiev. Just so you understand that these groups, they don't just operate like in the front line. They were like very deep inside the country, like everywhere. That was the beginning of the war situation. Okay, do we have anything else to show?
Yes, ma'am.
Your experience and being a time in there. I don't expect you to make an answer because I'm sure nobody knows that answer. But to the best of your knowledge, what's your prediction? Where is this war going to go?
Well, where's this war going to go and what's my prediction? The question is, where, in my understanding, where's the war going to go and what's my prediction, of the war? And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't have the faintest clue. I know my job is my patients, and that's what I focus on. And this whole war is being fought by individuals because it takes every single individual to do this. It's a team. You can't fight this war, can't win this war, can't get people home. But I'm going to tell you right now, nobody ever wins a war. No war in the history of the world has ever been won. The second that the casualties mount up on either side, that loss is tremendous and terrible. And Ukraine has lost whole entire generations of some of the best and brightest and most pure people that I've ever met in my life. And as a professional soldier that's trained with multiple militaries around the world, I've never served with anyone that were braver. I've never served with anyone that were stronger. I've never served with anyone that had more conviction, fought harder, and loved the men next to them. And that's one of the reasons that I can't walk away. And I'm even going back. So I'll be back there this week. And I'm going back for my third time.
What brought you to Toronto specifically?
Oh,
As for
well, we as a foreigner, how would we get transported to Poland? I'm going to be honest with you. I can't answer this. I'm sorry.
Talk, and it's really. Nurses, are there nurses on the front line working with you guys?
Is there nurses on the front line working with us? Every medical profession that you can imagine, from veterinarians that are now removing shrapnel and helping with the amputations, to our version of CNAs, nursing, you name it, Soviet personnel, people that have been retired for 40 years coming out of retirement to do what they can to help. But you got to understand that Soviet medicine, which is still what Ukraine is, their levels of nurses and doctors, physicians in general, are not to the standard that you would hold here in Canada or that we hold in the States. They're night and day different on the standard of those being abilities.
Do you want to say what you go from?
Oh yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet a woman there who we had gonna be my wife or / is my wife, and we would train wounded together. We train students together. You treat wounded together, classes, stuff like this. She's a pharmacist, working on her doctorate. Just got her master's degree. Still went to school full time while the war's going on. So literally still doing schoolwork while we're in between training classes and doing all this stuff. But she's still there, and she's still working, and she's still training. And I'm here. So when we go back this time, we'll be doing work together.
Okay, we're going to start to wrap up the session. I just want to, again, you can stay and ask questions and everything, but I want to share, this is the last slide that we want to share. And thank you everyone for being here. This is the saying that we always say, glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. This is call and response. You say glory to Ukraine, the other person responds to glory to heroes. This is the saying that is absolutely important. And
Yes, Ukraine.
yeah, Slava Ukraini. And you have, if you want to, David, I have of course his email. If you want to continue communication with him, I will give it to you. Just be mindful that he is a very busy man. And also there is a Facebook link. He has a page on Facebook where you can also go and see some updates sometimes or anything that you want to communicate. So
Well, we had I got into a Jewish community in Dnipro, and I was on a train back from Dnipro, and this big massive man came up to me, and he's like, "You American," and starts talking to me. I'm always kind of a little cautious. And long story short, he introduced me to another rabbi in Kyiv, and I started going to that and went there for Pesach. And then that rabbi in that community is this rabbi's community. So it all just it worked out perfectly. It matched together. But I have to say, if it wasn't for this rabbi, I wouldn't been able to come home from Ukraine, because I'm completely financially, I don't get paid for nothing that I do. I'm disabled. I get a pension, but now my loan payments and stuff like that are exceed my pension for the debt that I acquired at the beginning of the war. So literally because of this rabbi, I was able to fly home, or even have a little bit of a break that I needed. And and being able to come here and to be able to meet and speak and be able to participate, and the shul and the honor of having an aliyah and everything. And this is my first trip to Canada, so this was very exciting. Thank you.
okay, I just want to thank everyone on the
Online, and then we'll answer.
online for watching. We're going to conclude this. We did have a recording of this session, so we hopefully will put it online. Thank you so much for people who are online.
So we got questions. Well, he has a question, and question. So
How can we help?
Okay, I'm not going to end this. You talk.
Okay. How you can help is you can help sponsor my courses. That's what I need. I can buy the supplies inside of Ukraine. I can't ship supplies. So buying supplies in America or Canada don't work. I have to buy supplies in Europe, and then I have to have them hand delivered into Ukraine, or I have to buy supplies while in Ukraine. Operating costs in Ukraine, because the hryvnia is so low and the dollar's so high, it's about a 36:1 to ratio right now. The average doctor in Ukraine makes $300 a month. That's a top of the line physician, cardiologist, you name it, it's about 300 a month. Most people are living off $50 to $100 a month. Now, if you do the math on that, and a tourniquet is anywhere from $15 to $30, one family can buy one tourniquet a month in Ukraine. So Ukraine right now, even if the person there worked as many hours as they possibly could in the highest paying profession as possible, they don't make enough hryvnia to be able to cover the cost of just basic things that we have to have for the war. Now, in general, like with me going back, every single class, every single time that I teach, my parrot don't make a salary. He don't make money. So I pay him. I pay him every single week, whether I have money, don't have money, got to sell something, not relevant. I make sure that he's taken care of because he takes care of our men. And, that's how we systematically do it. They offer contracts to foreigners, but the second you sign a contract, you're at the will of the Ukrainian government. And you can't be productive when you work for a government. I don't care which government it is.
And I just want to add that I, of course, have all the financial information in case you want to donate some money. You can, it is always better to say money directly. And I'm not going to go into details on video about that, but and I will explain why, rather than donating to my discretionary fund. There are differences in that, and we're going to talk about it. But I have all the information. If you want to help, you can definitely do that. Thank you so much.
And